All right, close your eyes for just a second. I want you to strip away the walls around you. Erase the electricity humming in the background. Take away the supermarkets, the pharmacies, the cars, and literally every single modern tool you rely on. Imagine waking up thousands of years ago in a vast, untamed wilderness. You've got no house, no guaranteed safety. You are entirely exposed, placed mentally and physically in the incredibly vulnerable position of our earliest ancestors. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to look back at the origins of human resilience and explore how ancient humans survived without modern technology.
So, it's the ultimate question, isn't it? How did humans survive in such a harsh world? To get this, we really have to wrap our heads around the high-stakes reality of their day-to-day lives. Every single meal had to be tracked down, gathered, or hunted. Every shelter, built by hand from whatever the earth happened to offer. And every time the sun went down, that encroaching darkness could bring a whole myriad of lethal dangers. There was absolutely no safety net. So how did a species without thick fur, venom, or natural armor manage to not just survive, but eventually conquer the globe?
Okay, let's dive into this. The visceral reality of waking up in a world totally devoid of modern comforts is, well, it's almost impossible for our modern brains to fully process. Imagine waking up thousands of years ago with no electricity, no medicine, no vehicles, and no modern tools. There was no calling 911 for help, no quick run to the store. Survival depended entirely on human adaptability, fierce ingenuity, and just a relentless will to see tomorrow. We had to become the ultimate problem solvers, and that journey starts with the absolute basics.
Section 1. Mastering Food and Fire, the Primal Needs. To understand our survival, we first have to look at the immediate, pressing requirements of fending off starvation and the freezing cold. This is the very foundation of the hierarchy of survival needs.
Now, ancient diets were actually incredibly diverse, but securing that menu was a constant, exhausting effort. Humans survived by hunting, fishing, and gathering wild plants, fruits, nuts, seeds, and roots. But it wasn't as simple as just taking a leisurely stroll and picking berries. Not at all. Survival depended on a deep, almost instinctual understanding of the seasons, animal behavior, and being able to read vast landscapes. They had to possess this encyclopedic knowledge of which plants were safe to eat and which ones would literally kill them.
And then there's fire. Notice we call it a technology here. We don't usually think of fire as a technology, right? But controlling it was a monumental, species-altering shift. Fire was the technology that changed absolutely everything, providing warmth, light, protection from predators, and the ability to cook. Suddenly, humans had warmth on the freezing nights. They had light to push back the terrifying darkness, and a weapon to ward off massive predators. And perhaps most importantly, they gained the ability to cook. Cooking food made it so much easier to digest, unlocked crucial calories and nutrients, and allowed our ancestors to survive and expand into much colder, harsher environments. It was a real game changer.
Moving on to Section 2, Tools, Shelter, and Clothing, Engineering Survival. Because once food and warmth were secured, our ancestors had to engineer physical protections to shield themselves from an unforgiving planet. I mean, just imagine having to construct your own bedroom every few days using only what you could find on the ground. Building shelter meant using caves, rock shelters, branches, leaves, animal hides, mud, and grass. Our ancestors cleverly combined these natural materials to create vital protection. They used caves and rock overhangs when they were lucky enough to find them, but they also engineered freestanding shelters. These weren't just for comfort, mind you, they were absolute necessities to block out the freezing rain, biting wind, searing heat, and the ever-present eyes of predators.
And to build those shelters and to process the food they found, they needed tools. Enter stone tools. These were primitive but highly transformative implements essential for early human survival. By chipping away at rocks to create sharp edges, human survival was completely revolutionized. These simple stones were used for cutting tough animal meat, breaking open bones to access nutrient-rich marrow, processing fibrous plants, scraping hides, hunting, and preparing building materials. Seriously, a sharpened stone was the ancient equivalent of a multi-tool.
But we also had to adapt our own bodies to the elements. Humans survived by adapting to extreme weather, using animal skins, fur, and plant fibers for clothing and insulation. This human innovation in clothing is what allowed us to survive across drastically different, unforgiving climates. By utilizing thick furs and woven plant fibers, ancient humans could survive the freezing depths of Ice Age winters, as well as blistering hot environments. We couldn't grow thick fur ourselves, so we ingeniously borrowed it from the world around us.
Section 3. The Power of the Group, Strength in Numbers. Physical tools and clothing were only part of the equation.
Our ancestors' greatest survival advantage wasn't just physical strength or a sharp rock, it was cooperation.
And this brilliantly illustrates the point. The contrast between facing the ancient world alone versus together is staggering. An individual alone faced insurmountable risks, but as a group, they could take down massive prey by hunting together. By sharing food, they ensured no one starved when they had a bad foraging day. They protected each other's children. They actually cared for injured members, which, by the way, is a huge evolutionary milestone. They communicated danger, and they passed vital knowledge from one generation to another. Sharing resources and protecting one another basically ensured the continuation of our species.
Section 4. Knowledge was their greatest technology. Which brings us to the human mind itself. We often equate technology with microchips, but for ancient humans, the ultimate tool for survival was intellectual adaptation.
Think about it. Today, we rely so heavily on modern tech. Smartphones for navigation, computers for memory, engines for movement. But ancient technology was internal. It was raw cognitive power. Their tech stack consisted of hyper-focused observation, vast generational memory, intricate communication, and creative, life-or-death problem-solving. They didn't have Google, right? Their minds were the search engines, running constantly to interpret the world around them.
Just look at these crucial steps of environmental mastery. This was essentially their survival manual, memorized and passed down. Step 1. Find water, the absolute most critical resource. Step 2. Track complex animal migrations across vast distances to ensure a reliable food supply. Step 3. Identify useful plants for food and primitive medicine. Step 4. Predict weather changes by reading the sky, the wind, and animal behavior. This intricate knowledge was the software running on the hardware of the human brain.
Section 5. Facing dangers, a world with no guarantees. Yet despite all this incredible ingenuity, despite the tools, the fire, and the deep knowledge, they lived on a razor's edge. We have to remember the heavy, unforgiving threats that constantly surrounded them. Predators, injuries, infections, extreme weather, food shortages, and natural disasters. They shared the landscape with massive predators. A simple sprained ankle or a minor cut could lead to a fatal infection because, of course, there are no antibiotics. They faced sudden, extreme weather shifts, devastating food shortages, and terrifying natural disasters. The ancient world was spectacular for sure, but it was absolutely merciless. Survival was never guaranteed. Small mistakes could have serious consequences. We really need to let that sink in. In our modern lives, we make mistakes all the time, right? We forget to buy groceries, we take a wrong turn, we forget a coat. But in the ancient world, small mistakes could have deeply serious, often fatal consequences. Taking a wrong step, misidentifying a berry, or failing to keep the fire going through the freezing night could literally mean the end of the line. The stakes were absolute. Which leaves us with one unavoidable truth. Ancient humans did not survive because life was easy. They survived because they adapted. They learned from the harshness of nature instead of being defeated by it. They worked together in tight-knit groups. They invented tools from the dirt and stone. They harnessed the terrifying power of fire. They built shelters, and they carefully, desperately passed their hard-earned knowledge down to the next generation.
And that leaves us with this final, powerful thought to reflect on. Many of the incredible, complex technologies we use today began with something much simpler, a human trying to survive. The heating in our homes, the architecture of our cities, the global networks we use to communicate, they all began with a human just trying to survive the night. So next time you turn on a light switch or open your refrigerator, take a moment to appreciate the thousands of years of human resilience, struggle, and adaptation that made it possible. But it begs one final question. If everything we have was stripped away tomorrow, would we still have the raw ingenuity to survive the night? Thanks for joining me on this explainer.